2007 was just a great year for entertainment. I think we could all agree on that. I mean, movies, music, video games, it was all great that year. But 2007 was also a strange year of threes. You had Halo 3, you had Metroid Prime 3, you had Unreal Tournament 3, you had 300, you had Bourne Ultimatum, the third Jason Bourne movie, you had Graduation, Kanye's third album, you had Curtis, 50 Cent's third album. You had Super Mario Galaxy, the third 3D Mario game. You had Guitar Hero 3, you had Rush Hour 3, you had the three big summer blockbuster threequels all in the span of May 2007. Shrek 3, Pirates 3, and SpiderMan 3 all right there in 1 month. What? The early 2000s were a very exciting time for big blockbuster movies. You had so many new film franchises showing up. Visually, we were seeing more CGI and digital characters and bigger movies. And what was even more shocking, these sequels were getting pumped out faster than ever before. We're kind of desensitized to it now, but back then it was a big deal to see something like Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter being released annually. 2 Matrix movies came out in the same year. Jesus. Shrek, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Spider-Man may not have originated on film. They are all based on a book, a theme park ride, and a comic respectively, but having all these new film franchises launch at the same time was pretty exciting stuff. What's funny is all 3 got their starts on a different year back to back to back. 2001, 02, and 03. But all their sequels released at different rates, eventually causing all the planets to finally align and for the sun to shed its glorious light upon that perfect moment. May 2007, let it be known, 3 threequels were coming. And then all 3 of them sucked. Yep, all 3 of these movies, despite all of their hype, despite the fact that all 3 franchises came out with 2 home runs, all 3 supposedly fumbled the third. When these came out, they were considered hands down the worst of their series, and it was so weird to have so much collective hype for these new beloved franchises and for all their trilogies to end so bad. What's funny is that I even remember some instances where these 3 movies were marketed together despite being competition. My local Walmart had this huge banner when you walked in of all 3 of the main characters just right there. My thumbnail for this video is based on what I vaguely remember it looking like. I can't find any evidence of its existence. It's lost media, ladies and gentlemen. Now looky here, faithful viewer. Hi, yes, it's me. I have 3, count them 3, all 3 of the game adaptations of these threequels, specifically the PSP versions. For anyone who can find and locate the banner, please, I'm depending on you. Happy hunting, thank you. Shrek 3. I want to start with Shrek the Third mainly because this was the one I chose not to see at the time. I was aware of it, I loved Shrek a lot, but here's the thing. These 3 threequels were big deals, especially when you look at where we left off. Spider-Man 2 ended with Harry Osborn discovering his best friend Peter is Spider-Man, the same Spider-Man he blames for the death of his father. Black Suit Spider-Man was going to be in it, fucking Venom was going to be in it. This was going to be a dark, epic conclusion. You had to be there. We were dying to know how this would all end. Dead Man's Chest left off with Jack Sparrow sacrificing himself to the Kraken in front of his entire crew, and then Barbossa's back, holy shit! And Shrek 3, Shrek now has kids. All the marketing for Shrek the Third shoved all these ogre babies in our faces, and they just did not appeal to me. I guess DreamWorks was just too early to pull off the cute baby version of Green character. Dada! It was obvious the premise for this movie was Shrek being a father. Yeah, maybe it could be funny, but you can see as a 10-year-old this was not priority for me at all. So I decided to give it a pass, and everyone who did see it told me it wasn't good, and I just kind of forgot about it. So after finally watching Shrek the Third, I gotta say, it wasn't a complete disaster, but it was just really, really mediocre. After years of hearing nothing but bad things about it, I had a decent time watching this one. I wasn't bored out of my mind or anything. It's a lot of what I thought it would be. Shrek coming to terms with impending fatherhood, and what do you know, there's no babies in here. These obese boogers don't show up until the very last minute. Instead, we get a movie about Shrek handling the idea of starting a family and taking on that responsibility. Shrek is stressed out about fatherhood, and while he could go around killing younglings, instead he meets a new character, Archie, voiced by Justin Timberlake. He's this bland and milquetoast character that is completely forgettable, who has maybe one good line.
And Gwen, oh Gwen, I've always loved you.
Ew.
He's the vehicle for which Shrek will come to terms with fatherhood and taking on responsibility, but their relationship seems very forced and kind of flat.
Somebody help! I've been kidnapped by a monster trying to relate to me!
Shrek seeks out Artie to take his place on the throne, and through the course of the movie, they help each other find their value and self-worth, with Shrek kind of fulfilling a more responsible, fatherly role. Even though I didn't like the character, some of the more touching scenes come from their bonding.
But people used to think I was a monster. And for a long time, I believed them. But after a while, you learn to ignore the names that people call you, and you just trust who you are.
I think another major issue with this movie is it really just feels like a diet Shrek 2. There's this very straight-to-video quality with the plot. It reminded me a lot of Return of Jafar. Like, instead of giving us a new villain, we get Prince Charming. He's back, which I did not expect. Again, Fiona is left behind while Shrek and Donkey go off on an adventure while villain undermines things back at home. Why? They briefly go to this college setting, which I thought was pretty fun to see. It's the only real new location of the movie that's memorable somewhat. Beyond that, there's nothing really different about Shrek 3. I can't even really remember anything about Donkey I found memorable or funny. What happened? In the first Shrek, he was the major comic relief. He was what everyone was talking about. Shrek 2, we got Puss in Boots. Not only was every scene with him hilarious, he was adorable. In Shrek 3, we get Merlin. Does anybody on this goddamn planet remember Merlin in this movie? Also, Puss and Donkey switch bodies for most of the movie just because we had to give them something to do.
Oh, kill it!
I mean, Shrek the Third still has some funny bits though, like when the villains start taking over and doing evil things and the Cyclops starts ripping the stamps off of the mail. Okay, that killed me. Also, the fairy tale princesses in this movie, what a treasure. They were pretty funny. I think everyone kind of wishes we got more of them. Another good thing about Shrek 3 is the animation is still really gorgeous. Seriously, some of these frames look like some sort of art piece you'd see in a museum. Like this scene where Shrek finds out he's going to be a father while the ship is cast into what looks like the heavens. It's just kind of wasted because this movie doesn't take us anywhere new or places we haven't really seen before. Overall, it's a serviceable movie. It's not nearly as bad as people make it out to be, and it's one of the few tolerable comedy threequels. I think I also just appreciated that this movie was nice and short, whereas the other two movies we're talking about today are 3 hours long. And with that being said, next up is SpiderMan III. Now this was the movie I was insanely hyped for. I waited years to see where these plot threads from Spider-Man 2 would go, and the wait was excruciating. How were they going to fit Venom, Sandman, and New Goblin all in one movie? It was too good to be true. Was too good to be true. The hype train was unstoppable for me, and then I learned a lesson that day. That movies could be disappointing. And not only disappointing, movies could be dumb. As a kid, when you watch movies, you generally gauge its quality by how well it captures you. That's usually your metric. My critical eye wasn't quite there yet, but Spider-Man 3 started to change things in me. I started feeling different. Started lashing out at the things I loved, started eating pie, did a few dance numbers, and I started realizing movies I loved or were excited for could be disappointing and suck. I think by now we've all heard the major complaints with Spidey 3. Venom was totally shoehorned in the film because of studio meddling, the pacing is all over the place, there's so many contrived and silly moments, and I remember as a kid, I was just absolutely sick of all the love triangle romance stuff. It became so tired and overdone. I'm so sick of these people's relationship problems. Harry, Peter, and MJ are like those friends you had from high school that you see years later and they're still just going through the same toxic drama over and over. Like, Jesus, can you three just fuck already and shut up? Spider-Man 3 exemplifies why it's a mistake to conflate more drama with the idea of better drama. It juggles way too much until it becomes this gargantuan near 3-hour mess of subplots sprinting to the end credits. I also at the time didn't know what a retcon was, but I knew it was bullshit when they said Sandman was the one that killed Uncle Ben. To this day, I'm half and half about it, but it still mostly doesn't sit well with me. On one hand, it kinda undermines the last two movies. Peter didn't intervene with this criminal, and as a result, Uncle Ben dies. It's a guilt that motivates Peter to do the right thing because if he doesn't, people get hurt. It exemplifies what Uncle Ben was always trying to teach him. Even in the first movie, Peter learns that revenge isn't going to bring him peace. Interfering with his origin and telling us, yeah, actually there was nothing Peter could have done, kind of cheapens everything we learned. Sure, this retcon is a quick way to make Peter's fight against the Sandman more personal, but it's an even quicker way to take the audience out of the movie just for how contrived it feels. You're messing with the foundation of the entire trilogy, also this can happen. But on the other hand, like I said, Peter couldn't really have done anything that day. At the end of the movie, during the final confrontation between Sandman, he makes it clear to Peter that Uncle Ben died trying to do the right thing. This revelation, in a way, kind of supports the spirit of what Uncle Ben was always trying to teach Peter. It's not perfect in any stretch of the imagination, but the same lesson Peter originally learned still holds. You should always do the right thing. Uncle Ben held that belief to his dying moments, and it's something Peter can carry with him as Spider-Man moving forward. Except they never made a Spider-Man 4. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is, I guess one person really can make a difference. At the end of the day, I still think this retcon overall is still super messy and it just ends up muddying things about the trilogy more than it's worth, but I can accept it to some degree when watching this movie. Genuinely, I do like Spider-Man 3 for what it is. I think it's a fun superhero movie. It is long and juggles way too much, but I do like seeing this darker side of Spider-Man from this really corny angle. James Franco is absolutely hilarious in this movie. Pretty much everything that happens is all because he won't take 2 seconds to listen to what happened the day his dad died. When he finally comes to his senses at the last second thanks to his butler, it's fun to watch him and Peter finally join forces.
Looks like just in the nick of time.
A couple minutes ago wouldn't have been so bad either.
What are you gonna do?
Like, come on, that's so corny. That shouldn't work, but it absolutely does because I love these characters. But he ends up getting killed and MJ and Peter dance the night away, and it fades to black. It ends, such a sad ending for what was a great series. Out of all the threequels I can think of, this is perhaps the most perplexing and frustrating one. The way it was set up kind of felt like it was meant to be this finale, but it was never intended to be the last one, so it just kind of sits there as this somber, depressing end to what was always such a bright and uplifting series. Pretty much everything is wrapped up, but this is definitely not the way Spider-Man deserved to go out.
Pirate movie number 3.
I've not seen any of the pirate movies since they came out. Maybe glimpses here and there in passing, but for the most part, before this video, I had not seen any of the movies in like 14 years, and rewatching those first 2 now, they are just these dumb, fun adventure movies with a lot of heart. I forgot how good they were. Yeah, they're super long and the pacing can be all over the place, but damn, did these movies really tap into something special. They kind of remind me of a new age Indiana Jones, you know, a fun main character, goofy but exhilarating set pieces. Like, who came up with some of this stuff? Like Jack pole vaulting the fruit, that's straight out of a cartoon or a silent slapstick film. He's like a pirate Charlie Chaplin or Buster Keaton, it's great. When I was a kid, everybody I knew wanted to be Jack Sparrow, just a swashbuckling pirate who can get away with anything. You had the Naruto run, and you also had the Jack Sparrow flailing around run. What I remember about At World's End was being so hyped to answer the cliffhanger of Dead Man's Chest. Like Spider-Man 3, I just needed to see how this one would all end. I don't even really know where to begin with this movie. There's just so much going on, so many alliances and betrayals and loopholes and magic incantations and rules and big codes, until you're left with this maelstrom of concepts trying to reach a satisfying end.
Full bore and into the abyss! Are you mad? You afraid to get wet?
Listen, faithful viewer, you need to watch this movie with subtitles or you're utterly fucked trying to piece together all these plot points, especially because every 2 seconds a character whispers stuff like, bloody waddy whaler poorly, Calypso, sever that, mate. About 180 minutes in runtime, and the first hour of this movie can be pretty slow. It's got this Jabba's Palace and Return of the Jedi quality to it, where it's all about getting everyone back together just so the actual journey can start. Eventually seeing all these characters in an uneasy alliance trying to come together through goofy adventure moments is pretty fun.
All right then.
Here, Captain Jack is at his most eccentric. He's delirious and conflicted. I think this is where people either really recognize their love for the character or their complete annoyance with him. Also, bringing back Captain Barbossa was a genius move. I love every second of him in this movie.
All the pennant line. What are you doing? What are you doing? No, what are you doing? What are you doing? No, what are you doing? What are you doing? Captain gives orders on the ship.
Davy Jones as a villain is a little less threatening in this one than the last movie because he kind of plays a lapdog at the mercy of Lord Beckett for most of it, but he still has some nastier moments. Bill Nye, every line he delivers with this performance is just instantly memorable.
I can set you free, mate. My freedom was forfeit long ago.
Even a decade and a half later, the motion cap and CGI for this character is insane. I'd argue most modern blockbuster movies still struggle to even come close to this. It's also worth noting, At World's End cost $300 million to make. It held the record for the most expensive movie ever made. And that's a title that currently now belongs to Pirates of the Caribbean 4 on Stranger Tides. I think if At World's End was the last Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the whole series would be looked at much more favorably. And I think out of all the 3 threequels, this one is truly the best third act. For a movie that's so long, I really don't have much to say about this one. I think it wrapped up everything pretty damn well, and it's as good as an end to this trilogy that anyone could ask for. So, faithful viewer, those are the 3 threequels of May 07. I kinda touched upon this in my Halo 3 video, but making a third act is obviously very difficult. Concluding character arcs while also establishing a distinct identity as a sequel is a lot to juggle, and sure, I think realistically these threequels were never meant to end anything. Shrek the Third obviously is just a third Shrek movie, it's not Return of the King. But I think it's ingrained in us that a third installment is to be this bombastic finish, and definitely, when 3 threequels released all at one time, expectations were high. And since each threequel has since been followed up in some form, the hype and build-up behind these movies have long faded away to the ripples of time and reboots. They're now just the third ones, and with how many big blockbuster movies and nth installments of franchises get squeezed together nowadays, releases like these are all but common. And we'll probably never see a trio of threequels align like this ever again. So with my Shrek ears, my pirate sword, and my emo hairdo, let us remember the 3 threequels of May 2007. A bottle of rum, a pie with a strand of James Franco's hair, and ogre-filled Shrek Twinkies, Shrinkies if you will forever be my diet during months of May. Thank you for watching, faithful viewer.